Death. Death is what I think of whenever I see the word bubonic plague. In fact, one of its names is the Black Death or the plague. It was the first documented pandemic. That means there may have been earlier ones that people didn't write about. A pandemic is a worldwide epidemic. And if you look at the map, much of Europe, but let me tell you, it was even in Asia, right? 1300s and other times, at least 40 million people died of the plague. These were dark times when Yersinia pestis, that's the scientific name of the plague, which was a bacillus. And we know bacillus are rod-shaped, and it had a gram-negative cell wall, so thin cell wall. It used fleas as vectors, so anything that's an agent of transport is a vector. Yersinia circulates in the blood. One of the symptoms is hemorrhaging, which is massive blood loss, and often it was localized, so there were these purple splotches named buboes. And when you saw someone with buboes, they were as good as dead. And the bubonic plague got its name from the appearance of these buboes. Yersinia was spread, this is when it was really bad, pneumonic plague. That came from coughing, sneezing, and these sort of aerosol forms of the plague. And were inhaled, and mortality rates were 100%. So pneumonic plague just killed everybody. And it's still out there, guys. Anytime you see a rodent dead somewhere, don't go near it, because what happens is the rodent's body cools off, then the fleas start to jump, and especially if something warm is nearby. So I'm talking rats, squirrels, those are the primary ones. Smallpox. This was another dark time in the 1700s. Edward Jenner, he did some of his early work with milkmaids because he noticed that milkmaids, that is the women that would milk the cows, they got a mild form of smallpox that was called cowpox. So they'd get lesions. You can see the example here, but they didn't die from it, and it wasn't a terrible disease. So he noticed this, and then he scraped some of the fluids from those oozing lesions from the milkmaids and injected it into children. Now, we can't do this nowadays. We get lawsuits. But back then, Jenner was certainly one of the first documented cases where a vaccine was used to prevent a disease, in this case, smallpox. Germ theory, 1860s. Before the work of Koch and Pasteur, people used to think evil forces cause disease. Poisonous vapors, mysterious powers, the curse of God. That's what was causing people to get sick and die, at least until the germ theory came out. Pasteur was the first scientist to show that one disease came from another sickness. He also discovered what's called pasteurization. That's if you can flash heat something, you'll kill most but not all of the bacteria. And he was working in the wine industry. That's who's paying his bills. You might think, well, why not? Let's kill them all. Why kill some? But we do that because if we sterilize, yeah, we kill all the bacteria, but then we destroy many of the nutrients and the flavor. If you've ever had sterilized milk, I mean, why bother drinking it? It's terrible. Well, I mean, it's flavorless. I had to drink a lot in Kenya, and let me tell you, I prefer our milk. The value of pasteurization is that there are bacteria, but there's kind of like a clock, and you got to drink that, consume it before all those bacteria multiply, and now you have something really gross. If you ever had milk sit in the refrigerator too long, you know what I'm talking about. Pasteur's vaccine for cholera, what he did was really quite clever. He took chicken that were infected with cholera, and he took the blood from those chicken and heat flashed it, he pasteurized it basically. And now he took this pasteurized blood and injected it into healthy chickens. And what do you know? They didn't die of cholera, which is kind of cool. The amazing part was then he took live deadly cholera, and he injected it into these chickens that had gotten that pasteurized blood. Okay, so think of that pasteurized blood as a vaccine, and chickens didn't die of cholera. So he just kind of confirmed what Jenner had earlier discovered, but Pasteur was much more thorough in his methods, and so now we had some good data about vaccines. His work showed that an altered form of an organism, like when he pasteurized the blood, can provide some protection. And today, vacca means cow in Latin, and his work, as I mentioned, based on Jenner. Koch, about the same period as Pasteur. In fact, they were competitors to some extent. Koch studied etiology, which is the cause of disease in case of anthrax. Bacillus anthracis was infecting humans and cattle. Okay, it was huge herds of cattle were dying and they had to be burned, and so a lot of money was being lost. The organs turned blackened, and anthrax means black. The contagious endospores, okay, they may lay on the ground for 30 years. So this is nothing to mess with. Unfortunately, some countries do use this as a bioweapon. He extracted blood from an animal that died of anthrax, and in that blood he saw these rod-shaped factors. Now we call those bacilli, or bacillus singular, but no one knew back then. He thought, well, these don't belong here. They're not part of the blood. So I know this looks kind of complicated here, but it's really simple. He injected the infected blood that had the bacilli into healthy mice, and now these mice died of anthrax. When he looked under the microscope, he could see rod-shaped factors. Now you might think, well, the guy was no genius, because what do you expect? But his theory was each disease was caused by a specific microbe. People used to think it was one thing may cause the flu, and then next week, oh, that same thing is going to cause the cold, and then, oh, next week it's causing hepatitis. No, one organism, one disease. I mentioned bioterrorism. There are sanctions and agreements and treaties, but some countries still want to use it. Because see, if you touch it, it can kill you. If you breathe it, it can kill you. If you eat it, it can kill you. And sometimes not destroyed by antibiotics, except like Cipro or something. Semmelweis, famous for hand washing. Yeah, before Semmelweis's day, a doctor might go from one surgery to the next with blood and guts all over his hands. And he showed that washing your hands, maternity patients, women giving birth, recovered quickly if doctors washed their hands before operations. And even today, one of the most powerful things we can do is wash our hands. And a lot of people fail to do this. And to wash them properly, you got to kind of get under the fingernails a little bit. Of course, we have latex gloves too that help. Joseph Lister, you may have heard of Listerine, a product that was kind of named after him. He invented an antiseptic mixture that was sprayed onto patients. There's two famous paintings here. And what this did was it increased the post-operation survival, post-op. And that is because our skin is covered with Staphylococcus aureus, all right? And this is good. We need it. And but the problem is it's good on the surface of the skin, but if it enters our interior peritoneal space, then it starts to go crazy and we have peritonitis and we die. So spraying them down killed, at least temporarily, a lot of the staph on the skin. Fleming studied, it's kind of a neat story. He was looking at his petri plate and he goes, darn, it is infected with this darn green bacteria. But then he noticed a halo of non-growth around the fungus, and he thought, my gosh, maybe this would be something cool. So this is early 1900s. Problem is, we've used penicillin so much that now there's bacteria with a penicillinase that can feed on penicillin to some extent. So we've had to use other antibiotics. Beneficial bacteria, Staph aureus, certainly it can be bad or it can be good. It competes with fungus So if you try to scrape off all the staph bacteria off your skin, then you would be susceptible to getting a fungal infection. We need it. Okay, so when you take a shower, just soap up the armpits, the groin, between the toes, behind the ears, but don't do this major all body soapy scrub, because we need those staphylococcus. Yeah, so go gentle with the soap. Go easy with the scrubbing. It's not really necessary. Okay. Another type of beneficial bacteria is nitrobacter. You don't hear about it much, but farmers certainly know. What it does is it converts the proteins in the body of dead matter into nitrates. Right? And you might think of just humans, but no. I'm talking about dead everything, dead earthworms, dead snails, dead plants, dead insects. Okay, all that stuff. It would just pile up, and we'd have to wade through dead carcasses, all the dead squirrels and skunks that have died on the planet. But fortunately, nitrobacter is going to convert those back into nitrates, and nitrates are absorbed by plants. E. coli, it's kind of like Darth Vader. Yeah? Is it evil or is it good? All right. Certainly it's good in that it's one of the few sources of vitamin K. So it's one of those rare vitamins. We don't find it in our diet very often, but it's necessary for some basic body functions. So we need E. coli, and don't worry, you have E. coli. About 40% of your stools, your fecal material, is bacterial, and that is partly why it smells not so pleasant. Okay, I'm not going to test you on that 40% thing, but get the idea that we would die without bacteria and without E. coli. We couldn't expel excess cholesterol from the body. So, yeah, sure, it causes deaths from food contamination, but it keeps us alive. Lactobacillus, there's different types. I think of acidophilus, but there's vaginalis as well. Vaginalis living in the vagina. And what it does, it creates a acidic environment, okay? And so it drops the pH down to a point that fungi, they just don't like it. Okay, they want it a little more basic. And so as long as a woman can maintain a healthy lactobacillus colony in her vagina, then she typically has very few yeast infections. I'm thinking of candida. But once she starts interfering with that natural bacterial colony through use of birth control or antibiotics or douching, then we open the doors for yeast infections. Review here. Let's hit the highlights because it's a ton of information, but in a way we can kind of make this all make sense. Okay, bubonic. Think of buboes. Think of Yersinia, pestis. Pestis sounds bad, and it truly was. 40 million dying back in the 1300s, with pneumonic being 100% fatal. Smallpox, that's where the milkmaids had cowpox, and Jenner picked up on that. A wise scientist came up with the first documented vaccine, which was later confirmed and elaborated on by Louis Pasteur, who did this pasteurization, heat flashing, increased the shelf life of things. Worked with cholera. If you remember, he pasteurized the blood of infected chickens. It doesn't sound very tasty, but then he injected it and helped chickens to be immune to cholera. On to Koch, anthrax, studied etiology, study of disease, and worked with mice and those rod-shaped bacilli. Semmelweis, hand washing. Lister, that spray. Fleming, the accidental discovery of that green mold, penicillium. Staph aureus, one of those good guys, but bad guys too. Nitrobacter in the soil. E. coli, good. And vitamin K, not so good if we eat it in a hamburger by the millions. And Lactobacillus acidophilus and vaginalis. Whew, that's a lot of information. Good luck with it.